Good Tuesday morning, everyone. How's it going? We got some more Seahawks stuff to talk about today, and I really want to hone in and focus on the things that matter right now for this team because we have 2 games left in this season, and they are completely meaningless in terms of winning or losing. We already know that. Winning, losing, it don't matter anymore. Doesn't affect whether or not this team is a success or failure. We already know the answer to that question. It is a failure. If we win our next 2 games by 50 points each, this season is still a failure. And for most of us, we already know about how we feel about a lot of this team. We've already formed our opinions on guys like Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jamal Adams. A lot of these guys we already know. We're either on this side of the fence or that side of the fence. What we see over these next 2 games is not going to change our minds that much. But really, when you think about it, the Seahawks have kind of been playing relatively meaningless football for the last month. Ever since you lost that Monday night game to the football team, you've known that playoff odds were long. Very, very unlikely you were going to actually make any kind of a playoff push at that point when you were, 3-7? 3-8? I can't. It was one of the two. But whatever it was, you knew the odds were stacked against you. I think it was actually 3-8. So really, this whole month of December should have been an opportunity to evaluate what you have and make decisions on those players who could go one way or the other this offseason. One way or the other, you're going to have to make a determination that either costs money or resources with regard to these players. You're going to have to spend something to retain them. You're going to have to give something up to retain them. Or maybe the way in which you attack your certain positional needs affects whether or not they're going to get a chance next year. So I'm going to take a look at 5 Seattle Seahawks in particular who, over the last month, maybe even month and a half, 2 months, have been trying to sell you something as a fan, has been trying to sell this organization something. And with each of these 5 players, based off the evidence that we have built up over the last month or two, combined with whatever we may end up accruing over the next 2 games, I'm going to ask you guys, are you buying what these players are selling with what they have done in this lost season? We're going to start with Rashad Penny, and he's a very clear and obvious candidate for a discussion like this, right? Rashad Penny has had a career where he's had bright spots, he's had good moments, he's done good things. He's had a good yard per carry average throughout pretty much all of his career, but he can't stay healthy. Basically missed all of 2020. Looked like 2021 was going to be another lost season for him. And then suddenly, it wasn't. If you take a look at the last month of football that Rashad Penny has played, just the last month, so the month of December, played in 4 games, 54 carries, plus 4 catches, and he's had a lot of success. Almost 100 yards per game from scrimmage, 380 yards from scrimmage over 4 games, 6.4 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns. Made a little bit of a splash in the passing game as well. Caught 4 balls on 5 targets. So, after a long period, nearly 2 calendar years of Rashad Penny not being anything, suddenly you've got something. The 49ers game, it wasn't great or anything. He averaged 3.5 yards a carry, but he did have 1 big play through the air, 27-yard reception. You can definitely take a look at that game and say, hey, he contributed, he produced, he did something to help us win. And then he balls out against Houston, has a career game in Houston, 8.5 yards a carry, over 8.5. Rams, not a great game by any stretch. He had 44 yards on 12 touches, 13 touches, but you still looked at Rashad Penny and went, hey, this guy actually looks like he belongs in the NFL. A lot of the things that are going wrong for Rashad Penny in this game are more on the offensive line and the play calling than it is actually Penny himself. And then, of course, against the Bears, he eats. 135 yards, almost 8 yards a carry, another touchdown. So Rashad Penny has had a solid month of football now after not really doing anything for 2 years. And he's going to be a free agent this offseason. You know that he's not going to cost that much. At most, you're probably looking at 1 year, $2.5 million, maybe $2 million, maybe less. And PFF is also a big fan of what Penny has been doing over the last month. His PFF grade's all the way up at about 72. And there's nothing you can say about that other than, yeah, this guy might be coming around. And granted, the offensive line has gotten a lot better ever since we put Jake Curhan in. They've developed some run blocking ability. But overall, the offensive line is still not great at run blocking. So for Rashad Penny to be accomplishing this with this offensive line in this situation, he's definitely selling you something. But as a fan, are you buying what Rashad Penny is selling? Now you got Jake Curhan, and I think the Jake Curhan stuff is pretty self-explanatory at this point, right? He's a great run blocker already. He should be a primo run blocker for most of his career. Pass blocking, he's got to work on it. However, if you take a look at the body of work over his short NFL career so far, early in the season when he got in for a little bit of action against like the Vikings, it was awful. Against the 49ers, it was awful. But he still overall played a decent game against the Niners, I think. Houston, he played good, but it was a very clear contrast between his run blocking, which was elite, and his pass blocking, which was barely average. Not even average, really. And then against the Rams, I feel like he played pretty good against the Rams. I know PFF disagrees with me on that one, but I think he played a good game against the Rams. And this most recent game against the Bears, facing a difficult challenge, a pretty good Bears front, I think Curhan played well. Run blocking especially, but even in pass blocking, I didn't think he was a problem out there. There was no point where I was like, this Jake Curhan guy is going to get Wilson killed. Not any more so than I would about any other tackle on this team right now. Honestly, you could argue that he's doing a better job protecting Wilson than Dwayne Brown is. And even PFF gave him a great grade for that Bears game. I think it was like 73 or something. I think his PFF grade was in the mid-70s. That's really good. So, based off a relatively small sample size, it seems like this guy can play. We already know he can be a great run blocker, should be a primo right tackle run blocker for a long time. Pass protection is a problem. And if we are, for some reason, going to go forward with Russell Wilson, which at this point I am starting to very much doubt, you want somebody who can protect his, not his blind side, but you want somebody who can protect him, period. But that's something he could get better at. That's something that he could improve at. That is something that you would expect a rookie to struggle in, even if they are one day going to be good at it. I think Jake Curhan could become maybe average at pass protection. But regardless, based off what we've seen so far this season, where, by the way, Jake Curhan did play a decent number of snaps out of position at guard, it seems to me reasonable to say that he has earned an opportunity to compete for a starting job. And he's going to be here next year regardless. I mean, he's on a rookie deal. He's going to be here next year. But are you going to be going into this offseason thinking Curhan's going to be the de facto starter? I'm not going to go too far trying to find a right tackle because we have Curhan. So in order to be willing to do that, you have to be buying what Curhan is selling. Are you? Okay, next up we have Carlos Dunlap, and this is a very interesting one. Dunlap's about to turn 33, getting up there in years, and for most of this year he was on a milk carton. Milk carton, absolute. He was barely playing. When he did play, he didn't produce. However, with the evidence that we now have in front of us, I think we can reasonably claim that Carlos Dunlap may have been playing through an injury for a lot of this year, like turf toe. Maybe he was being underutilized or misutilized by the coaching staff because he was dropping into coverage so much. Whatever it is, however you want to put it, there may have been something, there may have been a reasonable excuse for Dunlap to be unproductive. And now we're going into this offseason. We know it's at least possible we stick in that 4-3 defense, cover 3 with Carroll. We know it's on the table. If that is indeed what happens, do you bring Dunlap back knowing that you only save $900,000 if you cut him? Based off the first couple months of this season, I would have said, yes, cut him because he's not worth anything. I'd rather just get him away from the team. However, we now have a month of football where Dunlap looks like he's actually showing up to play. Just like with Rashad Penny, just look at the month of December. The 49ers game, he had the big sack in the end zone and the pass deflection at the line of scrimmage that sealed the game. And he barely played in that game, by the way. He only played 7 snaps, and he still was one of our most impactful defensive players. Against Houston, didn't really see all that much from him. He had 2 tackles, whatever. Rams, 3 sacks, 4 tackles overall. Monster game for him. He was a big part of the reason why the defense was able to hang tough in there. And after that game, it really started to become worth paying attention to, the possibility that we might be bringing him back. And then, of course, a couple days ago against the Bears, he on limited snaps again, only 33, 2 sacks, 5 tackles, tackle for loss, a pass deflection, and he forced a fumble. So over this last month of football, December only, he has 6 sacks, 2 pass deflections, 7 QB hits, a forced fumble. I think this is a worthy conversation to now have because, again, it's really not going to cost you that much. And PFF, they're still a big fan of Dunlap. They think he's been effective and efficient against the run even when he wasn't making a big impact earlier in the year. 72.5 is a good PFF grade. So PFF believes that even when Dunlap wasn't getting after the quarterback, he was at least effective playing the run. And we do have a good run defense this year, so it makes sense that Dunlap would be at least fitting in that role. So are you buying what Carlos Dunlap has been selling to you in December? Do you believe that he has a decent year left in him in 2022? Would you bring him back knowing it doesn't really save you that much money to get rid of him? Next up, we have Rasheem Green, and this is a very interesting one. This is a very, very weird one, okay? So Rasheem Green has been pretty jaggy his whole career, right? Now, he's still young. He's not even 25 yet. He doesn't turn 25 until May. So he's still young. He when he first came into the league, basically he couldn't play because he was so young. It was almost like taking it was almost a redshirt freshman type of year, right? So Rasheem Green last year was supposed to be a make or break year for him, but he got hurt and didn't really do anything. So this year I was kind of looking at Rasheem and wondering, okay, what do you got for me? What have you got for me, Rasheem Green? He got off to a great start in Indianapolis. He had a couple of QB hits, like 3 pressures against the Colts, 2 PDs, and a sack. And then he kind of went back on the milk carton for a while, and it looked like we had our answer. Rasheem Green was a jag. Not a bad player, not a terrible player, worthy of being in the NFL, but not much more than that. It looked like we had our answer pretty effectively. He'll chip in with a sack every now and then. He'll do some positive things for you, but not a guy you should be paying more than a couple million a year. He's just a guy, another wasted 3rd-round pick, somebody who doesn't need to be here next year. And then suddenly, I'd say from the Green Bay Packers game on, it seemed like something kind of turned on. And I don't know whether or not we should believe it or not, but since the Green Bay game, so basically over the last 2 months, November and December, Rasheem Green has 4.5 sacks. And let's try to take a look here. So this is from my Pass Rush Friday chart. So if you take a look over the last 2 months of football that Rasheem Green has played, 2 pressures, 2 pressures, 1 pressure, 2 pressure, 1 pressure, 1 pressure. We don't have pressure numbers yet from the Bears game, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like it's going to be about 4 QB pressures from Rasheem Green in that game. So add it up, and you have a 7-game stretch where Rasheem Green has, 13 pressures. And given the fact that Rasheem Green is a 5-tech/3 tech, that's actually solid. If he plays decently the last 2 games, he's going to get to about 25 QB pressures. I can't completely blow that off. Now, PFF tells a different story. They don't like Rasheem Green. In fact, even though he had 4 QB pressures against the Bears, they still gave him a crap grade for that game. They gave him a grade of like 50. So they still see something with him they don't like. So that's where the hard part comes in. Rasheem Green is trying to sell you something with these last 2 months where he's played effectively and gotten to the quarterback and made some plays in the backfield. Are you buying what he's selling? And finally, I want to take a look at Sidney Jones. He's probably the last guy who's really been trying to sell something over the last couple months, but what he's selling has been pretty legitimate. When Sidney Jones first got here, he looked like the worst player in the NFL. First 2 games he got to really play significantly when we pulled out Trey Flowers. He was responsible for a 76-yard touchdown to Debo and a 60-yard play to Deshaun Jackson. And I was like, okay, bring me Trey Flowers back. But ever since that game where he gave up the 68-yarder to Deshaun Jackson, which, by the way, was also partially on Jamal Adams, he's been improving with every game he's played. He still hasn't made a play on the ball. He still hasn't made the interception, but he's been breaking up passes. He's been making plays in the run. He's been impressive with his breaks on slant passes. He's prevented big plays. He's, I think since that Rams game ended, he's somewhere around like close to 50% completion allowed. And this is with minimal pass rush in a lot of these games, by the way. So one thing I've noted about Sidney Jones is that his PFF grade has improved with every game he's played. It started back in like the 20s or the 30s. And it's been creeping up ever since then. And that includes this most recent game where I actually thought he got given a little bit of a hard time. They still said he played pretty well. They gave him a PFF grade of like 70 for that game. And his overall grade is up to 66 almost. If you take out those first 2 games where he was atrocious and gave up big plays, this is a legitimately starting caliber corner based off what we've seen since, I guess, the Steelers game. It's just been getting better and better and better. And Sidney Jones, like Rasheem Green, is going to be a free agent this offseason. I don't think he has enough of a track record of success to get any real money. Like, both Rasheem Green and Sidney Jones, they might be looking at like $2.5 to $3 million to be brought back on 1-year deals. And Sidney Jones has been selling you something good for about 2 months now. Dude has played as good as you can play given the fact that we don't have a pass rush. So I'll ask the same question with regard to Sidney Jones that I asked of the previous 4 players. Are you buying what they're selling? And whether or not you do is going to drastically affect our plan of attack this offseason, right? If you believe that Rasheem Green is selling something real and that he deserves to be brought back based off what you've seen these last couple months, that takes a lot of pressure off of you needing to find another 5-tech. If you believe in Sidney Jones, and by the way, one thing about Sidney Jones is you can only really bring him back if you bring Carroll back, then your cornerback situation's a lot better, etc., etc., etc. So, I personally, my evaluation of this is, I am indifferent on Rashad Penny because no matter how good he plays, I know that he's injury prone. And I definitely don't want to put him in a situation where we have to depend on him. But you can bring him back. He's clearly good. He's clearly talented. He can do some things well. If you're going to run it back next year, which I really don't want to do, but if you do, Penny may be a good fit for the second year of a Waldron offense if you decide to do that. So Penny I'm indifferent on. Curhan I'm buying. I'm buying what Curhan is selling. I like what I see from him, and I want to see if he can get better, and that's an opportunity to address the offensive line without spending a ton of money or draft capital. I'm not really buying Dunlap, but I think I'm buying enough of it to say it's worth $900,000 to keep him around for another year. I'm not buying Rasheem Green. I don't want to bring him back unless it's like for the vet minimum. I don't see any real value in that guy. I'm not really buying what I'm seeing. He's not playing badly, but there are a lot of things that he leaves to be desired. Like, for example, that Bears game, PFF gave him a tackling grade of like 20-something. They basically said this dude can't tackle. He can get pressure. He can get to the quarterback, but the dude isn't finishing plays. So there are too many holes there, and I am buying what Sidney Jones is selling personally. I would bring him back if you bring Carroll back. So that's what I would do. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's some other players, too, that you think are selling you something over these last couple of months when the Seahawks have been playing pretty lifeless, meaningless football. Are you buying what they're selling? And do you see them having a role going forward for the Seahawks? See you guys later. Go Hawks.